My name is Chloe. My husband, Liam. And I thought we'd found the perfect beginning to the rest of our lives. A small apartment, a quiet street, a city full of promise. We were young in love, and, looking back, gloriously naive. We figured the hardest part was over, that we had finally arrived. We had no idea we were moving into a place that was already occupied. We didn't know that the beautiful, solid oak door to our new home wasn't meant to keep people out, but to keep something else in. What you're about to hear is the story of what happened in that apartment. It's a story I've replayed in my mind 1,000 times. A story that still keeps me wide awake on nights when the house is just a little too quiet. The story I'm about to tell you is exactly what we experienced. It's our truth. I know some people won't believe it honestly. Part of me wishes I didn't either. But the terror was real. The fear was real. And it all started with a simple knock at the door. The heavy oak door slams shut with the force of a car crash. The sound is a physical blow, a concussive blast of air that echoes through our tiny living room. Before I can even process it, another, more chilling sound follows. A thick, metallic clunk. The deadbolt. It just locked itself. A strangled gasp tears from my throat as I scramble backward, my hands scraping against the floorboards. On the other side of the door, I can hear Liam yelling my name. His voice is muffled, frantic. He's pounding on the wood, his fists a desperate drumbeat. But I can't answer. I can't move. My eyes are glued to the peephole. The small circle of glass, which should be showing the brightly lit hallway, is just black. A complete and total void. A patch of absolute darkness that seems to be sucking the very light out of the room, and I know with a certainty that chills me to my soul that something is on the other side looking back at me. And then I scream. Section 1. The dream, but to understand that moment of pure terror, we have to go back 6 months, back to a time filled with hope and cardboard boxers. Liam and I had just gotten married. He'd landed a fantastic job in Seattle, a dream offer that was way too good to pass up. I was an aspiring graphic designer, ready to take on a new city. We were leaving our small town behind for the adventure of a lifetime. The future felt like an open road, and we were hitting the gas. Finding an apartment, though, was a nightmare all on its own. The Seattle housing market was, and still is, notoriously brutal. Everything was either ridiculously expensive, the size of a walk-in closet, or in a neighborhood that felt sketchy. We spent weeks scouring listings, going to open houses, and getting more and more discouraged. It felt like our bright future was being stalled by the grim reality of rent prices. And then, we found it. An older building in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. The listing called it Vintage Charm, which is usually realtor speak for falling apart. But this place was different. It was immaculate. The building had character. A beautiful brick facade with ornate carvings. Our unit was on the 3rd floor. The moment we stepped inside, we just knew. It felt right. The apartment wasn't huge, but the layout was perfect. It had high ceilings, big windows that flooded the space with light, and gorgeous hardwood floors that creaked in that charming, old house way. It had a small kitchen, a cozy bedroom, and a living room big enough for our mismatched sofa. It was more than an apartment. It was our first real home. But the feature I fell in love with the most was the front door. It was original to the building. This thick, heavy slab of dark oak. It had an old-fashioned, intricate brass doorknob and a heavy-duty deadbolt that made me feel incredibly safe. It felt solid, permanent. A guardian standing between our little sanctuary and the world. I remember running my hand over the cool, smooth wood, thinking about all the lives this door had seen. Liam joked that I was falling in love with the door. He wasn't wrong. It sounds strange, but it really felt like the heart of the apartment. We signed the lease that day, totally ecstatic. We spent the next week moving in, fueled by cheap pizza and pure excitement. We unpacked, painted a wall a bold, optimistic blue, and playfully argued over where to put the couch. We were building our nest. Those first few weeks were a happy blur. We explored our new neighborhood, found a favorite coffee shop, and spent evenings just sitting on the floor of our living room, surrounded by boxers, dreaming about the years ahead. We were blissfully, wonderfully unaware. We thought we were alone. Section 2. The first sign, the first time it happened, I barely even registered it. It was about a month after we moved in. Liam was at work, and I was at the kitchen table, sketching on my laptop. The apartment was quiet, just the gentle hum of the fridge and the soft scratch of my stylus on the screen. And then I heard it. Tap. Tap. A soft, hesitant sound. From the front door, my first thought was a package delivery. I got up, walked a few feet to the door, and peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty. The Moshi activated light was off, leaving the corridor in a dim gloom. I shrugged. Probably a neighbor knocking on the wrong door. I went back to my laptop and forgot all about it. A few days later, it happened again. This time, Liam was home. We were curled up on the couch, watching a movie. Tap. Tap, tap, tap. Same exact sound. Soft, distinct, and definitely coming from our front door. Liam looked at me, expecting someone. I shook my head. He paused the movie, got up, and looked through the peephole. Then he unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the heavy door open. The hallway was, once again, completely empty. The air was still. No sound of footsteps, no sign of anyone. Liam stepped out, looked both ways, then came back inside, frowning. "That's weird," he said, locking the door. I could have sworn I heard someone knocking. I heard it too, I told him. It happened the other day when I was here alone. He thought for a second. Probably just kids in the building playing a prank. Ding dong ditch? But with knocking, it was the most logical explanation. We lived in a big building. It was bound to be a little noisy, so we dismissed it. We wanted to dismiss it. Our new life was perfect, and we weren't about to let a couple of weird little things spoil it. We went back to our movie, but I couldn't focus. Every creak of the building, every distant noise from the street, made me jump. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting to hear it again. It was a tiny seed of unease planted in the back of my mind, and in the coming weeks, it was about to start growing. Section 3. Rising action. The escalation, the shift was gradual, so subtle we almost didn't notice. The soft tapping evolved. It grew more confident. What started as a hesitant tap became a firm, deliberate knock, the kind of knock you give when you know someone is home and you're waiting for them to answer. It happened at all hours, middle of the afternoon, late at night. Just as we were drifting off to sleep, we'd go to the door, check the peephole, and find the same empty, silent hallway. The prankin' kids theory started to wear thin. This felt too persistent, too targeted. Liam, ever the rationalist, came up with new theories. Old pipes, contracting, the elevator shaft, down the hall making weird, echoing noises. He was trying, I know now, to protect us, to protect our dream. He was building a wall of logic around us, but the thing on the other side of our door was starting to tear it down. Then came the whispers. I heard them first. I'd be walking past the front door and hear what sounded like a hushed conversation. The words muffled, like people were standing right on our welcome mat, speaking in low tones. The first time, I froze, my heart pounding. I pressed my ear against the cold wood of the door, straining to listen. Silence. I held my breath. Nothing. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, that it was just the neighbor's TV bleeding through the wall. But it kept happening. The sound was always faint, always gone, the moment I tried to focus on it. When I told Liam, he was skeptical. Whispers, Chloe. The walls are thin. We're probably just hearing Mr. Henderson next door. But one evening, he heard it too. We were both in the kitchen when a low murmur seemed to slide from under the door. We looked at each other, eyes wide. He walked slowly to the door and listened. Complete silence. He didn't have an explanation that time. He just shook his head, his face tight with a worry he was trying desperately to hide. The feeling in the apartment began to change. That warm, welcoming vibe was evaporating, replaced by a cold, heavy atmosphere. It was strongest near the entrance. Sometimes, just walking past the front door would make the hair on my arms stand up. I started to get the distinct, unsettling feeling of being watched. Not from the windows, but from the door itself. From the peephole. I took to covering it with a little piece of tape. It was irrational, but it made me feel a fraction safer. The first time I saw the shadow, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I was sitting on the couch when a flicker of movement near the bottom of the door caught my eye. A sliver of darkness had blotted out the thin line of hallway light from the gap. It was there for just a second, a fleeting, formless shape, and then it was gone. I stared at the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Did I just see that? It had to be a neighbor walking by. It had to be, but then, a week later, Liam saw something far worse. He was coming home late from the office. As he walked down the hall toward our apartment, he glanced at the peephole. From his side, he should have just seen the dark brass fixture. Instead, for a split second, he saw an eye. He said it was wide, distorted by the glass, and filled with a wild, frantic terror. Like looking at a fun house. Mere reflection of a panicked animal. He flinched back, and when he looked again, it was gone. He fumbled with his keys and burst inside, his face pale. Someone was looking through our peephole from the inside, he said, his voice shaking. But I'd been home all evening. There was no one else there. That was the night the unease turned into real, gut-wrenching fear. The feeling of being watched was no longer a vague paranoia. It was a confirmed fact. Something was in our apartment with us, and it was watching us. The activity shifted from watching to doing. It began with the doorknob. We'd be in the living room, trying to distract ourselves with a movie, and in our peripheral vision, we'd see it. The old brass knob would begin to turn, slowly, deliberately, as if an invisible hand was gripping it from the other side. It would rotate a quarter of the way, hold for a few agonizing seconds, and then slowly turn back. The first time it happened, we both just froze, staring at it in disbelief. Liam, spurred by a mix of fear and anger, jumped up and tore the door open. Empty hallway. Silent building. The silence was becoming more terrifying than any noise. He spent the next hour taking the doorknob apart, searching for a loose screw, a worn-out spring, any logical reason. He found nothing. Our last shred of security was the deadbolt. It was our nightly ritual. Before bed, one of us would lock it. We'd hear that satisfying, heavy thunk. And for a little while, we'd feel safe. That safety was shattered one Tuesday morning. I got up for coffee and glanced at the door. The deadbolt was unlocked. My blood ran cold. "Liam," I called out, my voice trembling. "Did you unlock the front door?" He came out of the bedroom, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "No." "Why?" I just pointed. The color drained from his face. He walked over and checked it. Definitely unlocked. "I know I locked it last night," he whispered. "I remember doing it. I always do." We checked the whole apartment. Windows locked. No sign of a break-in. The only explanation was that someone, or something, had unlocked it from the inside while we slept. We were vulnerable, The one thing meant to keep us safe could be undone by an unseen force. That incident created a new tension between us. My fear was all-consuming. I didn't want to be in the apartment alone. Liam, on the other hand, was trying to cling to the last shreds of denial. He was getting angry at the situation, at the fear invading our home, and I think a little at me for giving into it. There has to be a logical explanation, Chloe, he'd say. His voice strained. Old buildings are weird. We're just tired and stressed. The deadbolt unlocked itself. Liam, I'd argue back, my voice rising with panic. Doorknobs don't just turn on their own. We are not imagining this. Our dream home had become a battleground. We were both terrified, but dealing with it in opposite ways, and it was driving a wedge between us. The breaking point came on a Saturday night. We were trying so hard to have a normal evening. I cooked dinner. We opened a bottle of wine. We were sitting at our small dining table, just a few feet from the front door, trying to make small talk, and then it came. Bang. It wasn't a knock. It was an explosion. A violent, deafening crash against the front door that shook the entire wall. Our wine glasses rattled. A picture frame fell, the glass shattering. It sounded like someone took a running start and threw their entire body against our door. We both screamed. Liam, in a surge of adrenaline and pure rage, shot up from his chair. That's IT. He roared. He wasn't scared anymore. He was furious. He lunged for the door, twisted the locks, and yanked it open, ready to confront anyone. He flung the door open to reveal nothing. The hallway was utterly empty. The air was perfectly still. The motion-activated light was off. No sound of running feet. No slamming of another door. Just a deep, impossible silence. Liam stood in the doorway, his shoulders slumping. The anger drained out of him, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated dread. He slowly closed the door, locked it, and turned to face me. His face was white as a sheet. "You were right," he whispered, his voice hoarse. There's something here in that moment. All the arguments and denial died. We were united again, not in hope, but in terror. We were living in a haunted apartment, and we had no idea what to do. We were terrified. We didn't know who to turn to, trapped in our own home with something we couldn't understand. The world outside our door went on as normal, but inside, our reality had fractured. Speaking of finding support, I want to take a quick moment to thank the sponsor of today's video. That night, sleep was impossible. The debate was over. We both knew this wasn't in our heads. We lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to every single sound. The fear was a living thing in the room with us. The question was no longer, is this happening, but what is going to happen next? Section 4. The climax. The confrontation after that night. The pretense was over. The haunting wasn't subtle anymore. It was activa, and it was escalating. It felt as if our acknowledging it had given it strength. The phenomena began to split. We started hearing a new sound, one that was far more disturbing than the knocking. The sound of a child crying. A young boy. It was a heartbreaking, desperate sobbing, and it always came from directly outside our door. "Please," the small voice cried, muffled by the wood. "Let me in. I'm scared. Please, just let me in." My heart broke. My first instinct was to run to the door, to swing it open and help the terrified child on the other side. I stood up, my hand reaching for the knob. Liam grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. "Don't," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Chloe, think. What if it's a trap?" He was right. As much as it tore me apart, a colder, more primal fear kept me rooted to the spot. We knew what was out there wasn't a living child. We just stood there, paralyzed, listening as the phantom sobs eventually faded away into silence. This happened several times, and each time was a fresh new kind of torture. But the boy wasn't the only one. His cries were often followed by a different presence, a darker one. This one didn't knock or cry. "It," whispered, a deep, guttural, male voice. filled with raw anger. The whispers were short, sharp, and always the same. Get out. It wasn't a plea. It was a command, a threat. We could feel the malevolence radiating through the door. A palpable wave of cold that made our skin crawl. It felt like we were caught in the middle of some eternal conflict being played out right in our hallway. A terrified victim and a relentless aggressor, with our door as the only thing between us. The final night, the night everything came to a head, started quietly. We were both on edge. We had already decided we were breaking our lease. Around 10 p.m., Liam took the trash out. A simple, mundane chore that would trigger the most terrifying experience of our lives. I was in the living room when I heard the click of the door closing as Liam stepped into the hall. Not 2 seconds later, it happened. Slam! The door flew shut with impossible force, like it was kicked by a giant, invisible foot. It was the same sound from before, an explosion in our small living room. The deadbolt followed with a deafening clunk, the metal bolt sliding home with a chilling finality. I was locked in, or, more accurately, Liam was locked out. I screamed. On the other side of the door, I heard Liam's voice, screaming my name in panic. Chloe, Chloe, are you okay? Open the door. He started pounding on the wood, but I couldn't move. Primera wa. He froze in my back. Pressed against the far wall, shaking uncontrollably. My gaze was fixed on the door, on the tiny brass peephole. And that's when I saw it. The light from the hallway was gone. The peephole was completely black, a perfect circle of absolute darkness. As I stared, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing, I realized the darkness wasn't flat. It adept. It was moving. It was the silhouette of a Hida massive, broad-shouldered head pressed directly against the glass, blotting out all light. It was looking in at me. A wave of pure malice washed over me, so intense it felt like a physical force. It was the angry voice, the source of the hatred that had been seeping into our home. Then, the doorknob began to rattle. Not the slow turn from before, but a violent, frantic shaking. It was as if the thing on the other side was in a rage, trying to tear the knob from its socket. The sound was deafening, a cacophony of rattling metal and splintering wood. I finally found my voice and screamed again, a long, piercing shriek. Liam's pounding became more frantic, begging me to do something, anything. But there was nothing I could do but watch as our beautiful, solid oak door was being torn apart by a phantom of pure rage. Section 5. Falling action, seeking help, and a backstory I don't know how long it lasted. Seconds, maybe minutes. It felt like an eternity. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The rattling ceased, the blackness and the peephole vanished, and the dim light of the hallway returned. The silence that fell was broken only by my own ragged gasps and Liam's frantic voice on the other side. I couldn't feel my limbs, but somehow I forced myself to move. Shaking, I stumbled to the door and turned the deadbolt. I fumbled with the knob and pulled the door open. Liam practically fell inside, his face a mask of terror and relief. "Que gravet," me holding me tight as I sobbed into his chest. We stood there for a long time, just holding each other in the doorway of our violated home. We didn't have to say a word. We both knew we couldn't stay there another night. The next day, we checked into a cheap motel. We didn't pack, we just left. We left the lights on, the shattered picture frame on the floor, everything. We just ran. That night, huddled together in that sterile motel room, we finally did what we should have done weeks ago. We looked for help, not from a locksmith, but from someone who would believe us. After hours of searching online, we found a local paranormal research organization. Let's just call them the Puget Sound Paranormal Society. We sent them a long, rambling email detailing everything. We felt foolish, but we had no other options. To our surprise, they wrote back within an hour. They said our case sounded urgent and agreed to investigate. 2 days later, we met 3 investigators outside our building. A lead investigator, a woman in her 50s with a calm, reassuring presence. a tech guy laden with equipment, and a woman they called a sensitive, named Mara. We let them into the apartment. The air was still thick with a residual coldness. As Mara stepped across the threshold, she physically recoiled.
"Oh,"
she said, her hand going to her chest. There's so much pain here, and so much anger. They're both still here. The team spent hours in the apartment, setting up cameras, audio recorders, and EMF meters. According to the investigators, they captured several compelling pieces of evidence. Their audio recorders picked up what they called electronic voice phenomena, or even when they played the recordings back for us, we could hear it. A boy's voice, faint but clear, whispering the word scared. And later, a deep, rasping voice that seemed to snarl the word mine. But their most chilling findings came from historical research. The lead investigator explained that while they couldn't find a specific crime report tied to our apartment, the neighborhood's history from the late 80s and early 90s was rife with stories of gang activity and drug-related violence. Their theory, based on what Mara was feeling and the nature of the activity, was that our haunting was a residual energy replay of a tragic event. They believed a violent drug dealer had been killed in or near our building. But he wasn't alone. They believed a young boy, maybe a teenager acting as a lookout, was also killed, caught in the crossfire. A victim in the wrong place at the worst time. The investigators theorized that their spirits were now trapped, bound to the location. They were replaying that event, over and over. The terrified boy, forever trying to escape, knocking on our door for help. The violent man, his spirit consumed by rage, forever guarding his territory. Our home had become a stage for their never-ending conflict, and the door was the focal point, the threshold between their world and ours. The paranormal team offered to perform a spiritual cleansing of the apartment. They used sage and recited prayers, repeatedly telling the spirits they needed to move on. Mara said she could feel the aggressive energy fighting back, but that the boy's energy felt lighter, as if some of his fear had been eased. When they finished, the air in the apartment did feel different. The oppressive coldness had lifted, but the investigators told us cleansings weren't always a permanent solution. They couldn't give us any guarantees. Liam and I thanked them. We were grateful they'd not only believed us, but had given us a plausible, if terrifying, explanation. But as we stood in the quiet living room, we looked at each other and we knew an explanation didn't change what had happened. A cleansing couldn't erase the memory of that terror. We could never feel safe there again. We broke our lease. The next day, the financial penalty was steep, setting us back in a way that took years to recover from. But it was a small price to pay for our sanity. We packed our things in a frantic rush, our eyes constantly darting towards the front door, half expecting the knocking to start again. It didn't. The apartment remained silent. The last time I walked out, I didn't look back. I pulled the heavy oak door shut, and I felt a profound sense of relief as the lock clicked, sealing that chapter of our lives away. It's been 5 years since we fled that apartment. Liam and I are still together. We bought a small, new-built house in a sleepy suburb far from the city one, with no history, no secrets in its walls. But the experience left a scar. I still have nightmares about a black peephole and a rattling doorknob. A sudden, unexpected knock on our new front door can still send a jolt of adrenaline through me, catapulting me right back to that living room. We'll never know for sure what was in that apartment. The ghosts of a dealer and a murdered boy, or just some inexplicable, negative energy tied to a place. In the end, it doesn't matter. The fear it created was real. The trauma is real. We found our dream apartment, but it was a dream that became a waking nightmare. A constant reminder that sometimes the most frightening things are the ones you can't see. And sometimes, when you open a door to a new life, you have no idea what's waiting on the other side.